mystery writer, author of the San Klein mystery series set here in Winnipeg, also a biography of William Lyon Mackenzie King, and more. Today he's here to talk to us about his new book, Details Are Unprintable, Wayne Lonergan and the Sensational Cafe Society Murder. Welcome, Allan Levine.
Hi, how are you?
So this book, this beautiful book, the story itself really made headlines back in the day.
Right.
Caught a lot of people's interest.
Yes, it did.
What drew you to the story?
I had been looking for a true crime story, a book to write about. Maybe it's because I watch murder on TV, or maybe it's from the historical mysteries. But at any event, one day in my researches, I came across an article by the great detective novelist Raymond Chandler. It was a 1948 Cosmopolitan article, and in it he had his 10 favorite murders. The first one was the Charles Lindbergh case. But after that, number 9 turned out to be this case involving Wayne Lonergan and his wife Patricia Burton Lonergan, who was killed. And I had never heard about it, and the fact that Lonergan was from Toronto and a Canadian involved in a murder that took place in New York City on October 24th, 1943, sort of was interesting. Plus there was other aspects to the case about their relationship and about Lonergan's sexual identity that I thought was interesting. I started digging, and I discovered that there actually had been 2 books many years ago written about it. One was from the 1950s, and it was essentially a crime kind of magazine story by a Florida writer. And another was from 1972. There was an author by the name of Hamilton Darby Perry, who's also an American, and he had actually met Lonergan. Lonergan ended up serving 22 years in prison. I'm not giving away any of the story, but once he got out of prison in New York, he ended up being deported to Canada. And so Perry made connection, and I ended up reading the book. I thought there was a lot in it that was open to question, and I did actually, Perry died in 2009, but I did speak to his wife, who's a magazine writer in New York, and she told me some interesting things. So I thought there may be something more to tell. And then, because I got something that the other writers never could have, I tracked down the case files at the New York Record Office. And it took a little bit of work, but I discovered that, in fact, the New York Municipal Archives, unlike many archives across Canada and the United States, is very well organized. And if the case is more than 50 years old, they will actually, open up boxes or microfilm and provide you with the district attorney's case files, witness statements, medical examiners, almost every single thing you ever need.
Everything you could need.
Yes.
Okay, so for people who are not familiar with that story,
Right.
Tell us, what's it about?
Well,
what happened? What's the case?
October 24th, 1943, this 22-year-old, very wealthy woman from a German Jewish family, assimilated, was found on the Sunday. It was a Sunday, and her mother she had a little boy that was 18 months old who was looked after by a governess, and the 2 of them plus a friend broke into her bedroom finally after not seeing her all day and discovered her body. And she had been hit over the head with something hard, a candlestick holder as it turned out, and strangled. And her half-naked body was found in the bed.
And they suspected her husband?
Well, not right away, but pretty fast, because at the time, they had separated maybe 2 months earlier, after a rocky couple years. They'd only been married for 2 years at that point. So they had separated like summer of 1943. And he decided, after trying to find work, to enlist in the Royal Canadian Air Force. So he left New York and had moved back to Toronto. He had come to New York in 1939, and that's how he met her, which is another story. But he decided, he was sort of searching for what to do most of his life, frankly. And he was on leave, and he had visited New York that weekend. It was his second trip there in about a month. And once the district attorney and the police discovered that he had been in New York that weekend and in fact had he had actually visited his little boy, the son, although the wife wasn't home, Patricia wasn't home at the time, they decided that he was a person of interest. And they asked the Toronto police. He had flown home Sunday night at around the time when the body was discovered. And the Toronto police found him And the story that I tell takes place in how they get him back to New York, and how he's interrogated, actually first in Toronto by the deputy assistant attorney, a young guy in his 30s named John Lohr, and they eventually get him back to come back to Toronto, to New York, where he ultimately confesses to this murder. But it's much more layered than that, and for
questions of whether he was pressured into.
Well, not only pressured, yes, but he also Lonergan. I mean, the other aspect of the story what made it sensational was they lived a very ostentatious lifestyle. Cafe society, if people, I never frankly was familiar all that with the term, but it was a period in the 1930s and 40s in New York City in which very wealthy people, actors, Broadway stars, Hollywood stars, and very wealthy people spent their evenings, many days a week, drinking expensive champagne, eating expensive food, dancing to live bands, and getting their picture taken, and which their exploits and comments would appear the next day in the tabloid newspapers, and Walter Winchell is the most famous, but he had a regular table at the Stork Club was the most famous, and the El Morocco Club, which don't exist anymore, and the 21 Club, which does exist. So Patricia was sort of a celebutante, is what I would call her. That's what Winchell called her, sort of like Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian. And Wayne was introduced into this lavish lifestyle.
And that wasn't his background.
No.
She met him. He was working at
right.
the Greyhound
okay.
company.
So how they met?
He had to be charming. He really had to have something going on.
I mean, the thing with Wayne is he met the father first, and Patricia's father was bisexual, most likely, and so was Wayne, and they probably had an intimate relationship. So Patricia started going out with a man who had already had a relationship with her father. It's as strange as that sounds. That would be like 99% of certainty, I would say. And what happens is the father dies, and Wayne and Patricia get together, much to the mother. Patricia's parents also were separated, and the mother, of course, was not happy. She must have known what was going on. So yeah, it's a kind of bizarre kind of thing. But the marriage was doomed, to be honest, from the start. Although they did have a child in 1942.
So you took extra steps. I mean, you had this wealth of research materials, but you literally took extra steps. You went and you walked those streets.
Right. Well, I did. I visited all. Yes, the place on East 51st Street in New York, Midtown Manhattan, near 2nd and 3rd Avenue, is still standing. It's a beautiful brownstone. She lived on the ground floor plus the first 2 floors, and then another family lived on the 3rd and 4th floor. Yeah, and so I walked, and when Wayne confesses, he was staying at a friend's place on East 79th Street, so like 20-something blocks away, and he describes to the police the route he took back to where he was staying to cover up the blood on his uniform, because he was wearing his Air Force uniform. And I followed his exact footsteps, so it was kind of fun. But I got to visit all the other spots, and it gave me a flavor, and to see where he lived. When they were married, they lived in this gorgeous apartment complex on Park Avenue. It was probably the nicest place he'd ever lived, that's for sure. I mean, he didn't work. She had money from a trust fund after her father died. So, I mean, he played bridge all day with people that his mother-in-law had introduced him to. Somerset Maugham, a famous author, and among other people. And he was in this kind of lifestyle that he never had experienced before.
What an incredible experience it must have been writing this book. Did you have a favorite moment?
Did I have a favorite? Well, I mean, to be honest, the documents themselves. See, I had the medical examiner's report, and it became an issue at the trial. So I was able to really, I was inside the district attorney's office with all these. I know everything about the case, and it gave me an inside look at what was going on and what their thinking was, and I learned lots of stuff about the legal aspects of the case, because there was issues about the confession and other issues about his rights, and so I think all of that. I mean, I think the interrogation of the confession is the most interesting. So I felt like I was in that room, because I have the comments of the stenographer And I mean, it's just like literally, you couldn't ask for a greater collection of documents.
And so well written. You bring us right into the story, and you're gonna love the ending. It's
Yes.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.